So I'll start recording. So great. So what I thought we would do today is at least to briefly discuss kind of the objectives for the next release. Um, with the Yang tools being now in actually very good shape by showing that we can support compilation of the various standard models, including OpenROADM, OpenConfig, TAPI, the Transport API. I think that's clearly a demonstration that tools are in good shape, and also all with live compilation being in place, so that we're kind of set at a place where we can start using the tools for writing device drivers for interacting with devices. But clearly, that's not enough, right? That's just one stepping stone towards getting the full-fledged dynamic configuration capability going. So what we would like to do next is to move attention now from the Yang tools to the device synchronizer and to the device configuration store. And this is in order to be able to interact with devices in a way that allows us to configure them in a predictable manner, where, for example, we can download the configuration to the device. And if something happens during the configuration, we should be able to roll back to the previous configuration. Plus also to be able to interact with the device in a way that allows us to capture the operational state and allows us to kind of do incremental upgrades where we can take into consideration the device, that the device configuration already applied to the device, and then apply only the deltas between what the device should have versus what it already has. And so the thought was to demonstrate some of this capability at ONS this year, which is, I believe, at the end of March. So, which would give us pretty much the whole next release to work towards that goal. Currently, Utah is kind of in charge of the device synchronization, but we've lost, during the last release, we've lost Sitara, who was working on the dynamic config store service. And so the thought here is to kind of reinforce that part of the team. I definitely intend to contribute in that area much more than I have in the past, and kind of focus the efforts of the team around use case. Which the use case is going to be, and at kind of the general outline of the demo, is going to, we would like to ratify it or kind of verify its validity with some service providers, most likely with NTT, with ATT, or Deutsche Telekom, and just to make sure that we're solving the right problem for them, right? And then scope that use case to kind of demonstration that could be attained by the ONS. The goal here is to avoid kind of the frantic scramble that the team was subjected to during the last year, where you guys put heroic hours in to get the thing done. So clearly, while it was extremely admirable, we don't want to repeat that experience again, because that's really no fun for the team, and that's not, that's just not how, it's not sustainable long term, right? So instead, what I would like to do is just have a very deliberate, but also, concentrated and kind of a longer burn effort towards this goal. And that's why I think we need to make sure we scope the demo appropriately. But just to kind of repeat just at least the rough outline for the functionality to demonstrate would be to demonstrate configuration of a single device that would involve steps of discovering the operational state and the current configuration on the device, be able to apply through the dynamic configuration store and through the device synchronizer new configuration. And if something were to happen, something were to go wrong, where we could not apply the configuration in its entirety, we would be able to restore the device to its previous configuration. And if you can demonstrate it with respect to a single device at ONS, that would be great. And clearly we need to take into consideration for kind of the longer direction when we're designing our APIs and general structures. We need to also take into consideration kind of a two-phase commit approach where we could do the same with respect to multiple devices. But that's not something that we would most likely scope as a base of the demo. So I've talked for a long time. I'm going to take a breath here and let you guys provide feedback or ask questions or objections.
One quick query here, Thomas. What is the timeline for ONS demo? Like, is it already decided in which month it's going to be?
Well, so we're not in control over the ONS. That's something the Linux Foundation is organizing, and I believe that it's supposed to be at the end of March in Los Angeles sometimes. So we will have to adapt the scope to that timeline.
Okay. Yeah.
I can really quickly look that up where that is specifically. ONS 2018 here. Open Networking Summit 2018, March 26th through 29th in Los Angeles downtown.
Oh, fine. So we have around 3.5 months.
Correct.
Now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason I want to, the reason I'm bringing it up now is because in a few weeks we will be doing release planning for the end release, for the next release, and which roughly corresponds to the same time period. And so, if we could kind of concentrate the brigade's efforts around that objective, where everybody's working towards that same goal, that will hopefully, increase our momentum, and we don't have to we don't have to undergo the same heroics like we did last year.
Right. Basically, for the dynamic config store, I think we should be able to support in that area. That is what is based on the current things I can see it should be possible. So maybe I'm looking forward to see what all has to be done in that area, and then maybe we'll see like what things are there where I can contribute.
Right. I think during the last year we've identified some shortcomings in the APIs of the dynamic configuration store, specifically around the lack of, or at least around kind of suboptimal structure to support transactions. And that's something that Utah started to take a look at after Sitar departed. And then also around the area of events, basically, because we have right now the eventing mechanism we use is very granular, and we need to figure out a way how to consolidate the events across. For a change of a given subtree, right now we're sending basically changes for every single node in the tree, which clearly doesn't scale well. So we probably need to kind of step back a little bit and start and figure out what do we want not necessarily even what we want the API itself to look like, but how we want the overall use case of the use of the subsystem to look like. Because if you we don't have a detailed view, for example, of how Google is approaching things, but based on just some related discussions with Google engineers and architects, we've managed to kind of compile a glimpse into how their stuff is structured. And I think right now with ONOS, we're conflating kind of two purposes of the store. Where at one level we're keeping it as a very low level detailed information about each individual device and service, basically where it's basically we're trying to mirror the configuration that the device has and that the device should have. And at the same time that same store is being exposed directly to the northbound. And so I would like to revisit that, whether that is really indeed the right approach, or whether we ought to maybe structure things in kind of slightly differently, where what's exposed to the northbound is more kind of like kind of like intent. This is where you sort of specify what you would like to happen, and then have a separate configuration store, which is almost like a really a cache or controller side image of what the devices actually have, and use that to drive the difference-based configuration. Perhaps that's not the right approach, perhaps, or maybe perhaps the scope of that is too large. But I would at least like to just have a discussion at the use case level of how we would like to what the purpose and what the interaction with the device config store is, so that we can make sure we're solving the right problem.
Mhm.
You know, and I don't I want that clearly. The discussion does not have to be very, doesn't have to be protracted. I mean, maybe all we need to do is dedicate just one working meeting to it, just to make sure we're all on the same page, and then that we all understand the use case, because that's it. That is important, right? That we are on the same page and we're working towards the same kind of image of the solution in order to make progress.
Hi, Thomas. This is Henry. Yeah. So, echoing your comment, we're also kind of thinking whether it's necessary to at least conceptually separate the intended config, which is pushed down from the northbound, versus the actual config, which is the config that's running on the device. Whether to separate these two config in the two separate data stores. I was reading some IETF draft about YARN store architecture. It seems that the draft suggests to have a notion of a separate data store or multiple data stores to capture exactly what I just highlighted, right? There's a yeah. So all these probably we will probably need to have some separate sessions to discuss, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's possible that I think as long as we have kind of common understanding of what the big picture of the subsystem is and its usage, then we can then take and focus on different parts, and whether we do that in parallel or sequentially, we can then kind of work towards the same reference model.
Okay.
And Yan Chao is going to work with Guru and with also a number of the service providers to help kind of validate the use case, as I mentioned before, to make sure that we're, from their perspective, solving the correct problem, and then that will help, I think, kind of solidify the goal towards which this brigade is working. I mean, clearly, up to this point, it was essential that we have solid set of Yang tools, because without those, it really makes no sense to go any further. And so, I think the focus of this brigade up to this point was correctly directed. But I think now it's time to move to the next kind of layer in the stack. And I think our protocols clearly will require, the protocol adapters will require some adaptation. But I think the work in those is, I would say, more than half done, right? The work that you did, Henry, on REST conf, and some of the work that was done on netconf on the southbound. I think that should be in reasonable shape. Clearly, it will require some rework as a result of the device synchronizer on the south, and also changes in the interface of the dynamic config store will propagate some changes into the REST conf as well. but I think the large chunk of work will be around the DCS and the device synchronizer itself. That's what I would expect. So, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think it sounds reasonable. So I've started talking with, shoot, I lost his name. Jordan to see that. So currently the async doctrine actually API-wise support transactional update, but it was not available. And I talked with him a little bit, and it should be relatively not that hard to add a transactional support to that thing. So if we could put our internal data structure into async doctrine, we will be able to have somewhat way to communicate with the distributed primitive in a transactional way. So that's one way we probably need to evolve the existing data config store.
Right.
And one problem I guess I'm starting to see is that the root cause of the problem, probably why currently internal data structure is mapped into async doctrine and completable doctrine and a map, is that well, leaf is a leaf node. If you look at the data node object, actually is not a node in a sense, in a graph sense. It's actually a subtree. As a result, there is no object in our model independent object which represent a intermediate node. As a result, I think it's ended up in this design. So we may need to either introduce a purely intermediate node object and track graph vertices and edges separately, or we may just need to not store the data node and leaf node object directly in the distributed primitive and do the mapping when you read and write through the distributed store. That's currently what I'm seeing right now.
I see. Yeah.
And also for if you're going to start dealing with operational state, we definitely need to start modifying the data node object and so on. So we may need to look into that object model design in general.
I see. Yeah. Also, one thing related to this is the some of the scalability and performance. Clearly, that's something that we want to make sure that this is ultimately scalable and performant. But I think for the scope of the initial demo, I think it'll be perfectly okay to kind of leave those things for later and just focus initially just on demonstrating the kind of the end-to-end functionality. Just basically just need to make it work first. And so even if so I think it's for that, it's going to be important that we have the rough system interfaces structured correctly. And then as long as we have the ability to kind of isolate the details of the implementation from the other parts of the system, we can then optimize parts of the system later. And so if some of the kind of the optimization related aspects for the model structure, those can be potentially deferred for later. But for sure, if for example the data node as we have it right now, if it doesn't lend itself to some of the use case aspects, such as modifying the operational state, then we need to revisit that. But I'm hoping that what we do it does not change, it does not propagate too much into the realm of the Yang tool chain.
I agree. We probably need to figure out what's needed. What minimum need to happen on the tool side. Like the operational state, we probably definitely need to modify that on our object. But for the lack of the intermediate node issue, we could probably create an object on the fly for the storage purpose outside of the young runtime system for the DC store side of things. So.
Right. Yeah, I kind of want us to take an approach from outside in this time. From the use case, take a look at from the use case aspects, which will help us to determine what the external behaviors are with respect to the devices, with respect to the applications, and then we can work our way from outside inwards.
What else did I?
And so I'm hoping that probably like right after Thanksgiving, which is a holiday in US next week, that the week following that we can have the details of the use case reasonably fleshed out from Yen and from others, and then we can start basically discussions and kind of the planning for the demo. And if we kind of make it part of the objective of the end release to be able to accomplish this kind of as a kind of a demonstrable piece of functionality, I think that will get a lot of traction also from and visibility from the service providers. Because we know that NTT has been asking for elements of this for quite some time. We just were not simply at the position to deliver it, but I think now we're at the point where we can start working towards that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just at a high level kind of what I had. And I don't know clearly where this falls relative to the Yang 1.1. I know that from Huawei's perspective, the Huawei wanted to introduce support for Yang 1.1 because some of the models that Huawei devices offer require 1.1. So we should definitely talk about the kind of priority of that as well. But I guess from ONF's perspective, I think that introducing support for Yang 1.1 in the tool chain would be, I guess, secondary. But if you have enough resources to do both, or if you kind of partition teams to be able to accomplish both, that's certainly quite okay as well. But I think at this point in time, if we were to focus on 1.1 over the actual accomplishing the dynamic configuration, store, and device synchronization, that will probably not be as kind of attractive to the community. Right? It would be just basically making the tools underneath better, but without providing the overall solution. And that's why it's not as attractive.
Right, Thomas. So for 1.1, maybe we will be doing very minimal stuff, as even mentioned by you, since the overall ecosystem is not available, then there is no point to have the complete 1.1 support also will not help us. Right. So we'll have the very minimal thing which is required, and we may focus on the things which are more necessary to make the complete ecosystem work.
Yeah, that was kind of my reasoning as well. Yeah. So that's all I had.
So next week we are not going to have a meeting, right? It's a holiday, and
the team is free to certainly meet. It probably just won't get US participation in there.
Okay.
I certainly won't be able to attend because I'll be actually on vacation, but I will be back the week following.
Okay. Just one more thing, like these days, I don't see like the notifications are coming for these meetings. So sometimes it becomes hard to remember it.
Yeah. So what we may need to do is kind of re-enter those the meeting in the calendar to make sure that the notifications are set up correctly and list of attendees. So that's something for us to take a look at, so that the people are notified. And maybe what we need to do as part of the Brigade mechanics, we need to make sure we send an email reminder to people as well to kind of give them a chance to plan for it, and also to, not only from reminding them about the meeting, but potentially also to schedule discussion topics.
Okay.
And I think Jan will probably start joining now and then as well too. So that will help kind of in focusing the effort of the team. Yeah, kind of the general idea here is clearly the demonstration is simply, it's not the primary artifact, right? It's only a secondary artifact. It's just a way to show progress. Clearly the primary objective is to head towards production grade code. Because, sometimes the demonstrations can be just, putting together kind of a proof of concept to show people an idea, which is, there's nothing wrong with that either, right? But I think in this area, on this particular topic of configuration, we're beyond that point, right? We've done it last year, and now here is basically just showing them the bits and pieces of the production ready functionality to, but in a nicely demonstrable form. That's kind of the goal.
Okay, just one more query over here, Thomas. For the ONS demo which we are planning, are we planning operational store also, or is it like the configuration store is good enough? I was just thinking like whether we should move in a stepwise fashion wherein the devices discovery can be added, and the delta configuration based on the configuration store, which can be divided into the intended and the actual store, maybe something like that. And the operational thing, if can be done, it is well and good. Maybe if it is not achievable by that time, maybe that can be taken up later.
Yes.
Or is it?
Sorry, go ahead. Let me let you finish.
Yeah. So I was just thinking like, because I am not sure like how it will go. So if we can have it stepwise plan, that might help. That's what I was just thinking.
For sure, I think the scoping is, once we understand the overall use case, and I think, so we understand the general outline of the use case, I think, but there may be some certain key aspects of the use case which may be highlighted and this is something that we need to ratify with the service providers. Well, what specific pieces, kind of the anchor points, are important to them, and if it happens to be the operational state, then there may be something we can't, your suggestion may be something that we cannot do. But if it is something, for example, in be able to provide reconciliation between the configuration that the device currently has versus what it should have, then that may not necessarily involve the operational state, which is the state where the device is the source of authority, like statistics and things like that. Then in that case, then we can do what you suggested, right? So rather than guessing at this point in time, I would like to get the understanding of what some of the key characteristics of the functionality are by the service providers, and then we can do our scoping based on that.
Fair enough. Yeah, understood.
Yeah, but from what I understood, just at a high-level discussion with Jan, and based on some of the requirements that we got from NTT from last year, I think what you highlighted, which is the kind of the delta of configuration and ability to actually be able to commit the device, a new configuration to device in kind of a transactional manner with respect to one device at least. That is more important than capturing operational state.
Okay. So is it only entity, or I heard like you mentioned
there are others clearly, but I think so. We've gotten high-level descriptions and high-level requirements from AT&T in the past, but probably the most kind of detailed or specific kind of requirements we got from NTT last year. They have some specific asks. Not this is the asks are not necessarily limited to the dynamic configuration store, though most of them are related to that. But there are some that are outside of that, and so I don't think we'll be able to accomplish all of those clearly, but we should be able to hopefully line up the use case with some of those requirements from them and from others. I know that Deutsche Telekom, Verizon, AT&T, we had similar discussion with them, but never really got any details other than from NTT. And clearly, we want to do work that is applicable to more than one service provider, and that's precisely why Ian is going to help us kind of distill a kind of a generalized requirements, but generalized in the sense that they apply across multiple service providers, but specific in a sense that something that we can concretely aim for. And so that when we have our demonstration of this functionality, we know that we can be sure that this is something that multiple service providers can get excited about.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, Thomas.
Okay. Well, I think that's all I had for this morning. So, unless there are other questions or discussion points, or is there anything to talk about for the upcoming release, the Magpie release? Nope. Okay. So just a quick recap. The 2.3 release has gone out. Everybody saw that, right? Mm-hmm. And we moved the ONOS code dependency to the 2.3 as well. So I think that's in good shape. Do you think there is a need to start a support branch for the 2.3? And in the past, in ONOS EN tools, we have not created support branches for the different versions. But if you think there is a need to do that, let me know.
Sure, Thomas. I think we'll see if there are some bug reported, then that might be helpful. But if there is none, then maybe based on the bug reported, we can decide.
Sure, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that you knew there was a possibility, right? Because, for example, if some of the Yang 1.1 work or so were moving forward, and that's something that we didn't want to at least initially expose our minor releases to, then we can certainly start a support branch. But you're right, doing that on demand is probably better. That way we don't have the unnecessary overhead of the support branch a priori. Okay. So unless there's anything else, we can probably call it a day for today.
Thomas, quick question.
Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt earlier. Can I trust that the wiki for the DCB is the best place to go for information and the latest, and it reflects accurate design and architecture at this point? Maybe not.
Well, maybe not. The high level direction definitely is accurate, but if it's talking to the actual implementation and so on, probably it's out of sync. So high level conceptual design part, probably the documentation, the goal, what was the goal, how we are trying to solve it, the big picture part probably is accurate. But if it talks about individual details, probably you want to check into the actual source code tree.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there is a Google document that was kind of put together when we were going through a refactoring of the Yang runtime. There was a document that Brian and I started. This is almost over a year ago, which kind of talks about the high-level picture of things in terms of the Yang compiler, Yang runtime, the serializers, and other things like that. Just at the kind of what these things should be.
Okay.
I still think that fairly accurately describes the purpose and relationship of those items. I don't know if that document is linked from the wiki page. Perhaps that's something we can do, but it's definitely kind of a work in progress.
Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. I appreciate it.
And yeah, please don't hesitate to ask questions on because you don't hesitate to ask questions on the distribution list, because just because we
discuss.
yeah, because we may not have had the time and or necessary organization to put together the documentation which we should have, and so we want people to go on Easter egg hunts when or fruitless hunts for information that's not there.
Okay, very good. I will. I know where the Google group is, so I can post a question out there too, or try to find your email if I need to. Thank you.
Great, yeah, and well, welcome to the team. I hope you are hopefully you'll find this interesting, and hopefully we'll get contributions.
Yeah. I'm really just interested in learning more and what it provides. I have a high level idea. I've looked at the documents months ago, and just kind of want to be more informed of what the goals are and what dynamic config can provide, because it's very relevant to some of the things we're doing with ONOS and with Volta too. So
right. Yeah, like I said, right now up to this point, the usage is kind of is from the viewpoint of the device driver. So we have the necessary functionality in the Yang toolchain and the Yang runtime to be able to serialize, deserialize objects, and then we have the necessary protocols to facilitate interactions with the outside world. What we don't have at this point in time is kind of this centrally, we have a prototype of it, but it's not really something that can be used in production yet. The dynamic configuration store and the overall reconciliation logic. That's something that we don't have, and that's something that we want to deliver in the next release, at least to some degree.
So do you guys, just as a vision, do you have at a higher level architecture, do you see dynamic config Brigade being used to tie into Volta, the northbound interface of Volta, whether that becomes RESTconf or NetConf or whatever? Do you see ONOS being a solution, a single solution for dynamic config from a high level orchestrator all the way through ONOS into Volta, or configure at lower level configuration?
Well, so certainly, I mean, Volta is effectively just a device, right?
Yep.
If you put a kind of a box around it, it's disaggregated device, but it's effectively from the viewpoint of a controller, it would be a device. And if the device supports Yang models through which we can configure its behavior, then absolutely that would be integrating it on the southbound of ONOS. It is exactly what we want to do.
That's what I thought. It seemed obvious to me, but I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it or put the two together, certainly in the Volta community. Some things we're doing now are reaching around ONOS. Obviously, ONOS and Volta are tightly and well integrated from an open flow and a flow standpoint for provisioning of layer 2, layer 3 stuff. But with regard to PON and lower level layer 1 physical device configuration, there's kind of a gap there. So you have options to reach around ONOS, but my interest in dynamic config Brigade is, does that provide a clean architectural solution to use ONOS for both flow provisioning and device configuration, if you know what I'm saying?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's kind of what I thought. So that's really good.
So Gaurav posted a link to the document, and that's kind of the document from which we started to work. And I'm also posting a document to a set of slides that were used for webinar that I did jointly with Anis Shaikh from Google. So that's also posted here. That kind of presents, that includes kind of the background rationale for our approach. And so, the driver-based approach is currently something that we can do already, which kind of is the abstraction-based one. And then kind of highlights some sort of rationale for how we're approaching the information store approach, and shows the overall scenarios for configuration of devices, configuration of services, the role of the Yang runtime versus the device store, One thing that the diagrams do not depict at this point in time is the component of device synchronizer. That's something that we should probably introduce. But this kind of presents a snapshot of how we see the system being used today. And this is something that we'll have to kind of at least briefly revisit to make sure we're on the same page against that background of the driving use case. So if you have those two links right there, that will probably give you a big picture of what things are. And also there is a narrative of the for the slides that is available in form of that webinar that I did with Anis.
Oh, very good. So are these posts going to be on the dynamic configuration Google group?
We should, we can certainly send them, or we should probably maybe update the wiki page, maybe.
Yeah, either way is fine. I have both of them up generally, and so easy access either way.
Yeah. Here, let me see if I can change the permissions here. Change this, anybody? Okay, so I can't. Okay, I'm gonna have to create a duplicate of the Yang Tools webinar and share it, because right now that one is owned by Anis. So I'll see if I can re-export it for view.
Yeah, I would really like to see that one.
I'm sorry?
I would really like to see that one.
Yeah, I'm going to. So we'll update the wiki page with these references.
Okay.
And I'll send it to the group just as a, just as an email, so everybody can have these things.
Very good.
Okay, so I think so. Expect to see that in hopefully next 15 minutes. I'll send a message to the group. And
do you think I'll get that? I'm not 100% sure I'll get that as a member of the group. I might. But.
Oh, are you subscribed to the Brigade or you're not?
Yes, I think so. So that okay. Yeah, I should be.
Yeah, and we'll also update the wiki page so that it basically.
Okay, very good. Yep, that's right. I should get it. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Okay. You want to do a status pickup or not?
I'm sorry, can you repeat, Yuta?
Oh, do you want to do a status sync up or not? The Jira status. What? Or another way of saying it is the Jira stay up to date, I guess.
Yeah, let's do that. Yes, let's do that before we hang up.
Mm-hmm.
Can I let you drive that one?
Sure. So the first one, so I guess, is from Gaurav. Augmenting standard Yang model is a problem. I'm not completely sure what this ticket was, but it's in completed state. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, Yuta. Actually, this was regarding target linking. Basically, the common models were there in place. Now, if any of the Yangs in other model is augmenting the common models, that should actually go to the one which has been registered earlier, not the local copy of which is there with those models. So that is what has been done over here, so that the augmentation information is correctly maintained.
Great. And is there an item that you are currently working on, or the ticket status is okay as of now until we figure out the next step plan?
As of now, there is nothing more. Only thing is Sonu is working on the any data implementation right now. So that is the only job which is going on from the Yang tool perspective.
Mm-hmm. Understood. And that is in progress, and hopefully.
Yeah, that is in progress.
Like this to get. That's it. Thank you. So I guess the next time is Henry's one. So there's two items on the list: the REST-conf and the device proxy state. And I think in the previously, the device proxy part is deprioritized over the filtering one. So can you update the current status?
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Both Jira's we have the coding part done. this morning I just pushed a code review request for the device proxy. I like to have the team to review at a high level whether the design is on the right track while I'm testing, right, the coding level. I'm still testing but I already pushed for review, so that I would appreciate if the team can kindly provide me some some suggestions on the changes. Actually, I will take a look what the compiler, because when I pushed it was compiling. I compiled okay locally. So this is the status. The RESTconf filter. I would probably we can after finish review the device proxy, then we can probably start review the filter. If everybody agrees with that, then that's what I would do.
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. So I'll try to take a look at the patch later today.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
And on my end, so I've been looking at the gap mainly in the dynamic config store, and trying to understand why it is currently designed this way and so on. And I'm still working on that. And as in that process, I think there's a way to do a sort of a short-term workaround to consolidate the dynamic config event. So I have a patch in Garrett that I need to test it out. But so if that works well, I think at least as a short-term workaround, we will be able to have reduced number of dynamic config event and avoid this chain of unnecessary event getting fired, which was submitted as part of the transaction kind of things. And then after that, probably I'll need to start looking into more detailed what needs to happen in order to store the whole tree in a single primitive, and or how to update transactional update, what needs to happen on the primitive side, and so on after that. That's what I'm currently working on right now. So I think that's it. If there's any other item that's being worked on somewhere somehow, please feel to get for it. So I think that's it for the status sync-up part. So finally, I think we can close this session if there's nothing else.
Great. Going once.
Thank you, guys.
All right, cool. And yeah, in the meantime, Philip, did you see the updated document with the global permissions on a chat?
Yes, I finally saw the chat. I wasn't following that when you guys first posted that, but I see it here in the GoToMeeting, so I got both of those links. Perfect.
Okay, and so we'll still update the wiki page and send a message.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
From now. Bye bye.